Test. 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 All right, hi everybody. We're just going to give it a couple moments here so that everyone can get settled in before we begin. All right, we'll go ahead and get started. So thank you for coming here to attend this presentation today. My name is Claire Burke, and I'm a Career Services Associate here at Employment Boost. And today we're going to be going over some resume writing best practices and how to make your resume stand out in such a competitive market. So we'll be going over some strategies you can employ to help make your resume, the best possible shape it can be to perform in such a saturated market. All right, so before we start getting into some tips and tricks on how to make your resume stand out, I'd like to take a little bit of time to just go over who we are and what we do. So here at Employment Boost, we are a full-service outplacement, career coaching, and resume writing firm. We're headquartered in Troy, Michigan, but we have offices across the United States. And our team of certified professional resume writers and career coaches have a lot of background and experience in headhunting, recruiting, and executive search. So all of our insights are informed by real-time dynamics, and we have a really great opportunity to get insights into the minds of hiring professionals so that we can create resumes that perform well to the best of their abilities. So our firm's B2B and B2C services are built with over a decade of industry-leading career services experience. Employment Boost is the nation's top professional and executive writing service. We have 5-star ratings across multiple platforms, from Google to Facebook to Yelp to SHRM. So we've got a lot of great expertise and a lot of great experience over here. As you can see, Employment Boost is a subsidiary of Heavy Hitter Holdings. A lot of different brands involved with that and a lot of executive recruiting firms. This is a great resource that we take advantage of. When we create our resumes, we partner with our in-house recruiting team to make sure that we understand what they're looking for so we can create resumes that meet those needs and exceed any expectations for the current market. So now that we've gone over that, let's take a little bit of time to go over the agenda for this presentation. We'll start out by breaking down resumes and their formatting and why it's important to understand these best practices. Next, we'll go over some different tips and strategies for resume writing, as well as some common mistakes that we see a lot over here that you can avoid. Finally, we'll go over any questions that you may have. Feel free to let us know in the live chat, and we'd be happy to answer those and point you towards any resources that we can. All right, great. So before you begin writing your resume, it's really important to understand who and what will be reading it. So as you can see, majority of the time, supervisors, HR managers, and talent acquisition specialists are going to be the people that overlook your resume and kind of oversee the interviewing and hiring process. But it's really important to note that before your resume even gets into the hands of one of these hiring professionals, it goes through an applicant tracking system. An applicant tracking system is a digital database that houses resumes when they're submitted online. And supervisors, HR managers, and recruiters will then input key search terms into the ATS to narrow down the candidate pool and identify the resumes that are most qualified for the position. So it's really, really important to understand how to format your resume to perform well within these applicant tracking systems. If your resume isn't set up properly with the correct formatting, the information won't be able to parse through the computer correctly, and the applicant tracking system won't be able to identify that you are a qualified candidate. It doesn't matter what experience you have or what a great candidate you are for the role. Your resume at the end of the day, if it does not pass through an applicant tracking system successfully, will not reach a human being in the end. So when you're writing your resume, it's really important to, yes, tell your story in a way that appeals to the human eye, but also to understand the digital aspect of the resume and how the resume is sorted and selected. So a lot of people have questions on what an applicant tracking system actually is. An applicant tracking system is an electronic database that stores resume. Like I mentioned, These supervisors, HR professionals, and recruiters input key search terms to narrow down the pool. Oftentimes, a single job posting will get thousands of resumes and candidates. So the ATS is a great way for these professionals to narrow down the selection process. They'll input these terms, which you can often find in the job description itself. We'll be talking a lot about key words and key phrases that are important to include. So it's really important to understand where to find those and how to best utilize them. Again, if you go through the job description that you're applying for, you can often see the qualifications that they're looking for and the types of experience that these hiring managers want to see. And by including phrases, terms relevant to those responsibilities, you can increase your resume's visibility within the applicant tracking system. When a hiring manager searches through an applicant tracking system, the ATS scans thousands of resumes and pulls forth the ones that have those terms in it. However, these terms are not weighed equally. Frequency is a big factor in this. The more often you use a word, the more likely the applicant tracking system is to pull it to the top of the list. Similarly, placement matters. A word at the top of a resume carries more value than a word at the bottom. So it's really important to include these key terms at the top of the page to help boost its visibility. Bolded words also carry more weight than non-bolded words. So you can go through your resume and bold these key phrases to help increase the chances of your resume being chosen by the applicant tracking system. The ATS also parses for location, education, certifications, so be sure to include those as well. A lot of companies use geo-filters, so it's really important to include the location so that your resume doesn't get rejected. At the end of the day here, when you write a resume, you're not just writing for people, you're writing for the ATS as well. 75% of qualified applicants are rejected by the ATS due to reasons that might seem inconsequential. Formatting is a big part of this. The formatting of your resume is just as, if not more important than the content, because the formatting can make or break whether or not the applicant tracking system can properly read your document. Graphics and images are not the key to success here. Oftentimes, they can limit the way the ATS can parse through the information and can result in the resume being rejected or discarded. They can also increase the file size significantly. It is not too large. That can result in the ATS rejecting it or marking it as spam. So now that we've discussed how important formatting is when it comes to your resume's performance in the applicant tracking system, we can go over some proper ways to format the document. Your resume should be as visually efficient as possible. What that means is making sure that your resume is easy to read. As you can see on this example here, everything is clearly labeled so you know exactly what it is, and it's also got a fair amount of white space to balance out the text. We want to make sure that this document can be skimmed easily, and we also want to make sure that it's completely clear what all of this experience is. Some best practices that we recommend as well is to limit the resume to around 400 words per page. That helps it be easier to read, and the average recruiter or hiring manager only spends about 8 to 12 seconds to overlook a resume before deciding whether or not to move a candidate forward. So again, it's really crucial to achieve this visual efficiency. You should always use a resume that is 1 to 2 pages long. You never want to exceed 2 pages. The only exception to that rule would be if you were creating an academic CV or a federal resume, but for the majority of cases, for a standard resume, you want to keep it at 1 to 2 pages. You also don't want to use any colors, text boxes, tables, or graphics, anything like that an applicant tracking system might be unable to process. Another key factor with colors is understanding that once your resume does pass through the ATS and gets into a human eye and in human hands, you have to understand that at the end of the day, people are people. These managers are human beings and they have their own likes, dislikes, tastes, and it's really important to avoid the chance of inviting any potential for bias. So for example, let's say you use orange font in your header, and let's say that the hiring manager who's looking over your resume hates the color orange. Whether they know it or not, that might make a difference in how they view your candidacy. So it's really important to keep it professional, neutral, and black and white, and avoid any chance for bias on that end as well. All right. So something that we always recommend is including a professional summary in the resume. Again, because supervisors only have about 8 to 12 seconds to review a resume, you want to make sure that the summary, which is often the first thing that they'll look at, is right. This is also a great place for keyword optimization. Like I mentioned, applicant tracking systems value words that are higher up in the resume with more value. So you can use the summary as a chance to input those key terms. It's also a great opportunity to show a little bit more about you and your skill set. Focus on an outline of your achievements and skills that you bring to the table, and make sure that it's impactful. You want to keep the summary short and succinct, no more than 4 sentences, but make sure that each of those sentences is used wisely and show something that makes you a great candidate for the role. You can also use the job title to declare interest in a role. That and the areas of expertise can be tweaked depending on the position that you're applying to, and we recommend making minor modifications to the resume every single time you submit it so that it is best tailored to the role that you're submitting it to. You also want to make sure that you have a header that has your contact information. If you don't have your phone number and email address, the hiring manager can't reach out to you to move forward in the interview process, so be sure to include that as well as your location. At the very least, city, state, and zip code. Like I mentioned, a lot of companies use geofilters, so you want to make sure that you're not rejected because you don't have a location on the document. So once you've tackled the professional summary, go ahead and move on to the body of the resume or the content itself. You want to make sure that each bullet addresses an accomplishment or responsibility. We do really want to focus on accomplishments here, achievements. There's only so much space on the resume, so it's really important to show the impact that you have made on a company. Do your best to keep the bullets fairly condensed. 1 or 2 lines is best, but make sure that you're using that 1 or 2 line to show things that you have done to bring value to the companies that you've worked for. It's also a great idea to use action verbs to start each bullet. This can bring energy and life into the bullet point, and it also helps further drive in the point that you have made these initiatives and that you have accomplished these big wins. So try to switch them around. As you can see, migrated, devise, these are some strong words. Launched is a good one. Champion, leveraged. Using words like this can help bring energy into the sentences and make it a little bit easier to read and more engaging. You should also use as many quantitative metrics on the resume as possible if you have them. Any numbers that are tied to your performance, any way to contextualize and strengthen these bullets and the claims that you're making in the bullets. So see if you could pull any of those up and integrate those as well. And it can be any kind of number, anything that shows the breadth of your responsibility and what you did. So whether it be the number of clients that you worked with, the number of accounts you managed, the number of revenue from sales, anything like that can again bring value to the bullet and strengthen the claims is going to be helpful. Consistency is key when it comes to writing your resume. You want to make sure that you're maintaining consistency across all of the different positions, the formatting, all of that, so that, again, it's streamlined, smooth, linear, and easy to read. So as you can see in this example, we have 2 different roles, but they're formatted very similarly. We have the name of the company bolded, the location not bolded, the timelines, as you can see, the years have dates attached to them. If you do decide to include months in the timelines of your professional experience, make sure that you keep it consistent throughout the document. Don't just include months on one position, use them on all of them. You can also see that there's a little bit of a difference in formatting for each function and each kind of administrative detail. The company is bolded, the title of the position is bolded and italicized, and they're different font sizes. This is a great way you can break up the resume and kind of stagger it so that it's easier to read. If you see a resume that doesn't have bolding, italics, and different font sizes, it can sometimes look like a wall of text and can make it really difficult to skim. And again, these hiring professionals are only taking about 8 to 12 seconds to overlook your resume, so it's really crucial that it's easy to read, and the bolding and italicizing the fonts can help draw the attention to where you want the reader to see. You should also be specific about the locations of your positions, again, providing kind of a framework for past geography and the tenure of your experience. So moving on to education, you should be strategic about the placement of your education. And this is going to differ on a case-by-case basis. If you're an entry-level candidate with little to no professional experience, it might be a good idea to move the education to the top of the resume, as that's going to be more important and provide a framework and show that you have those skills. Meanwhile, if you've been in the professional field for a while, it's a good idea to move it down to the bottom. Generally speaking, the longer that you've been out of school, the less relevant it becomes on the resume. So be sure to include education, but you don't need to flesh it out and you don't need to highlight it front and center. Again, consistency. You want to make sure that you're consistent about how you format the end of your resume. As you can see in this example, we've left aligned the titles. You don't have to do that, but whatever choice you make for formatting, make sure that you're being consistent with it when it comes to the end of your resume. Finally, education doesn't have to stop at high school, college. Think about some training that you've done. Think about the certifications you've achieved. These are great things to include on the resume, and it shows that you're constantly looking to expand your skill set, which is a great trait that a hiring manager is going to look at very positively. So if there are any certifications, any proficiencies, any awards or affiliations, you can include those as well. So now we're going to show an example of a really specific education section. We built out and fleshed out the content of the education section here, and this would be a great strategy for entry-level candidates who don't have professional experience. It's a great way to build out the resume and show those skills that are going to be crucial in landing a new role. So you can include things like coursework. The coursework is also a great place to get keyword value. Again, if the courses are related to the role that you're pursuing, that optimizes the chance of your resume being pulled for the role in the applicant tracking system. You can also include projects, student involvement, whether any organizations you were a part of. Those are all great things to include as well. And so we would typically recommend being highly specific like this for those entry-level candidates who don't necessarily have extensive experience that they can show in the professional field. So now let's go over some common resume mistakes that we see a lot. A common mistake that's fairly prevalent is an objective statement, the use of an objective statement instead of a professional summary. Rather than writing an objective statement that shows what you want to do, use that space to show what you have done and the skills that you bring to the table and the accomplishments that you're proud of, right? By including those in the professional summary, you can really show your professional brand and who you are. And again, it's going to be one of the first things that a recruiter or hiring manager sees when they look at your resume. So it's a great place to show those skills. You also want to avoid any irrelevant information on the resume. You don't need to include every single position that you've ever held. Make sure that you're focusing on what's important and what's relevant to the role that you're pursuing. Another common mistake that we see a lot is listing job responsibilities rather than accomplishments. Oftentimes when we go through our resume reviews, through our free resume review service on our website, when we're overlooking the resumes, we see a lot that look like they were directly copied and pasted from the job description itself. And while it's a good idea to incorporate terms from job descriptions into the resume, you want to make sure that you're highlighting accomplishments, not tasks. You want to show that you can make an impact on a company and that you are the right fit because you have this desire to help and to grow. You also want to avoid any spelling or grammatical errors. It goes without saying, but you want to make sure that the resume is as professional as possible. And spelling and grammatical errors can lead to a hiring manager thinking you're disorganized or not, keeping it very clean and very sound. And then finally, funky formatting. Again, we want to stay away from that, not just for applicant tracking system purposes, but also if the resume is formatted strangely and is hard to read, it's not going to be as effective. So finally, some additional thoughts on mistakes and some do's and don'ts. We do recommend including a technical proficiency section. So if you have experience in different softwares or skills, it's a great thing to include. Again, you can get some keyword value, and it also shows that you're keeping up to date with technologies. And you should also highlight the most important projects that you've worked on. Again, show that you've made an impact, show that you've been able to help your company. But you don't need to include every single project that you've ever worked on. Again, we want to make sure that we're not going too far into detail. This is a resume. not a manifesto, and it's meant to be an outline of your greatest achievements and accomplishments. So there's no need to get too far into depth explaining things. Just provide enough context of the essentials and an overview of that. We also recommend keeping your resume up to date and adding your accomplishments as they come up. It keeps you motivated, right? When you add a new project or a new accomplishment to your resume, as you are making that accomplishment or as you are on that project, it'll be kind of motivate you to make sure that you're always looking for new ways to improve and new ways to build out your resume. It's also important to keep the resume up to date so that you're ready if a new opportunity comes up. Even if you're happy at your current company, you never know when a dream job opportunity comes up, and sometimes there's some time-sensitive deadlines on that. So if you keep your resume constantly up to date, you'll be ready to apply as it comes up, and that'll be very helpful. So it's really important to make sure that you're filling in any glaring gaps in your experience. Again, while you shouldn't list every position that you've ever held, it is important to try to fill in the recent gaps. So if you did have to take time off, recruiters and hiring managers won't be concerned. As you can see, we have an example here. Maybe you had to take some time off of work to care for a loved one. You can include that on the resume to fill that gap and show that you were doing that. And then as well, there are some valuable skills that might be able to transfer into the role that you're looking for. Just make sure that if you can, to fill these gaps. Again, we don't want any employers to think that you have an issue with tenure or raise any red flags surrounding that time off. So then another tip here, you want to make sure that your resume is relevant and focus on your more recent and greatest accomplishments. Again, there's no need to list every position that you've ever had, and we actually recommend cutting the resume off around the year 2000 and keeping it on more focused on the most recent 20 years of experience, and that's for a couple reasons. One of them is that the more recent experience is most likely going to be far more relevant to the types of roles that you're pursuing. You've grown in your career and you're at the point where you're ready to make the next step, and the responsibilities and accomplishments of your most recent roles are going to apply more so than older roles. And you also want to make sure that you're avoiding any chance of ageism or bias. If the resume goes back too far, rather than showing the growth and experience and the skills that you have, you might be revealing your age, which can be a factor and can open the opportunity for bias. So focus on the relevant recent work experience instead of including decades of experience there. You should also look for opportunities to upgrade your skills. This is a very competitive job market, and a great way to stay a viable candidate and show that you're ready to grow and learn is to take on some professional development opportunities. See if there are any programs that companies in your industry value, and if there are any online classes that you can take to refresh your skill set. Another great thing that you can do is get active on social media. You can develop a digital footprint, make connections with people, and that's a great way to find new opportunities for positions as well. So that's a great way to kind of expand your skill set and help out in the job search. So finally, we have an activity here for identifying strengths. So this is something to keep in mind as you write your resume. There are a lot of forces at play when it comes to the job search. There are internal forces, external, positive and negative, and as you can see, we have a chart here. So a positive internal force is your strengths, right? Think about the strengths that you bring to the table. And a great way to think about that is to go over previous performance reviews. See what your managers and colleagues have complimented you on and on the skills that you bring to the table. A negative internal force are your weaknesses. We all have areas where we can improve. So start thinking about areas where you'd like to grow. And that's a great opportunity as well, in assessing that to see if there are any training courses that you can take to expand your knowledge base. Moving along, there are positive external forces, so job opportunities that come up that you can take advantage of, and then negative external forces, so threats to that. Think about your skills and think about your strengths, types of positions that you're looking for. Something you can even do is list out the qualifications and skills that the job description mentions and think about how your skills can transfer into that or relate to that. It's also a great place to think about personal traits that make you unique and make you stand out. Again, there are thousands of candidates applying for each role a lot of the time, so it's important to show who you are and how you are the best candidate to be hired. So think about any personal traits. Maybe you have excellent communication skills. Maybe you have a great attention to detail and are very organized. Think about those. Think about other things that relate to that opportunity and how you can best, show your traits that help you with that. All right. Well, thank you so much for watching, everybody. That is all that I have, but I'd like to take some time to answer any questions that you may have. That's a great question regarding applying to jobs for the same company. That's something that you can certainly do. If you've applied for a role with a company and haven't heard back from them and want to apply, again and send that out again if an opportunity opens back up, you can feel free to do that. There's no consequences to applying to the same role multiple times if you haven't heard back, right? It's a great way to keep trying and increase your chances of being viewed and seen for the role. Any other questions? All right, well, if there are no other questions, we can go ahead and wrap up. But thank you so much, everybody, for taking the time to attend today. And I hope everyone has a great rest of their day.